here, but what I will do is share my screen. And I have your slides as well, Greg, so I can drive yours.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes, most welcome. Okay, so SHIELD webinars are part of a drive center called SHIELD that we started it 2 years ago. And now we just submitted phase 2 proposal. Hopefully we will go for phase 2 and have more of these webinars because I adored making them and hosting them. So before I get into what is SHIELD, I just wanted to present Greg. He has, we're very honored to have Greg Robinson. He's a program director of the James Webb Telescope. That is, I'm so eager to hear more about it. Greg, my background is in astronomy, so I'm very excited to what James Webb is going to give us. Greg Robinson has more than 30 years experience with engineering, program, project manager. He, as I said, he is also experienced in executive leadership at NASA. He's now the program director of the James Webb, and he is going to tell all about it and also his personal journey and experience. And before I describe what is SHIELD, just wanted also to mention he got the Presidential Distinguished Executive Rank Award in 2013 and the Presidential Meritorious Executive Rank Award in 2007. Okay, so what is SHIELD? For folks that came before, you probably heard about it. It's part of this initiative that was pushed in the last decadal survey to have centers dealing with transformative science questions that can only be answered with a center umbrella. So we put one for the outer heliosphere called our heliospheric shield. I'm the PI and John Richardson from MIT is a program manager. The vision of these drive centers to develop a global model for the heliosphere, not just develop this model, but to understand the main questions that theoretician observers are grappling the last couple of years. SHIELD stand for solar wind with hydrogen ion charge exchange and large scale dynamics. You can check more details in this website down here. And we use a combination of all sorts of observations, theory, and not only global MHD models, but also localized kinetic models to achieve this goal. And again, just to put in a larger perspective, so far, our heliosphere, the bubble around our sun, is the only habitable astrosphere that we know of. So we want to understand the properties of this astrosphere in all its gory details to be able to predict what other stellar systems are out there that are habitable. Again, I urge you to check our website. We are constantly updating it. We will have soon a new trailer. We have, if you check the outreach tab, especially, is being constantly updated. And we have also amazing stuff like the testimonials that we have people telling their journey of how they came to space physics from all sorts of different paths. And this webinar is part of this story to create new faces of space physics and scientists in general. So if you want to know more about it or participate, just feel free to reach out to SHIELD Outreach at bu.edu or to my own email. Okay, so I'm going to stop this presentation, and Greg, I'm going to pass the ball to you, and I will share your slides. And feel free if you want to start interjecting the slides with more of your story. The floor is yours.
Give me 1 minute.
Questions at the end. I will stop my video to. Hold on.
Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I'm certainly happy to be here. Um, I don't talk a lot about myself, so bear with me, but I love talking about the telescope. So if we go to the next slide.
Even if you don't talk a lot about yourself, Greg, I might ask you questions at the end.
I'll weave it in. I'm not shy about it. I normally don't initiate it.
Great. Okay, next slide. Perfect.
So, what is James Webb, and why are we doing this telescope? Many of you have heard about and learned about all of the 30 plus years of Hubble discoveries. James Webb is 100 times more powerful, if you could just imagine what that means, than Hubble. So we're trying to find where did we come from, our place in the universe, are we alone, trying to answer all of those questions. And of course, we're trying to look back about 13.5 billion years, 300 or 400 million years after Big Bang, to see the formation of first galaxies and how the universe was formed. Which blows my mind to think about that. And of course, other distant worlds, and we're looking within our own solar system as well to better characterize planets like Mars, the atmosphere. And one thing, exoplanets was just being thought of when Webb was first in formulation. And now there are thousands of exoplanets out there, and Webb will certainly characterize those a lot better than anything we have today. And Spitzer and TESS missions set the pace for that. Next slide. So I will say, as we're transitioning, we have this is a partnership between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. It's a very, very strong partnership. And I'll talk just a couple of minutes about some of the contributions. So this is at a high level what the observatory looks like. Of course, on the top in all of its glory, you see the telescope, the primary mirror. That's 18 segmented mirrors that make up one. If we can go back. I'll keep talking. So 18 mirrors that make up one, and I think we're going the wrong direction. And out away from the primary mirror is the secondary mirror. You can't see it, but it's along those trusses. And the instrument package, the scientific instruments on the back side of the telescope. And below is the spacecraft bus and the iconic sun shield. That's the size of a tennis court, if you could imagine, with 5 membrane layers. Next slide. So just a quick comparison, if you can see the little person down at the bottom. On the left, you have Hubble, on the right is James Webb. And Hubble's mirror, it's a single mirror, and it's 2.4 meters in size. And of course, on the right, James Webb is 6.5 meters, which still blows my mind. We have to fold it up because it won't sit inside of a rocket fairing, so we can launch the thing and then deploy it in space. Webb is a lot larger than Hubble, but it's much lighter. So a lot of new technology, lightweight material, and really innovative engineering to make that possible. And of course, we need that lightness for the rocket capability. Next slide. There are many other technologies that are different that I won't get into today for Webb versus Hubble. So I talked about this global partnership. So in US alone, Webb was touched in 29 states across the US and across 14 countries, primarily in Europe and Canada. So Webb has been all over the world, so to say. And we do have a strong partnership. We appreciate that with ESA and CSA, and certainly our industrial base in the US. Next slide. I'm gonna go through my briefing kind of fast so we can talk a little bit about me. So this is the telescope and the instruments, and we call it OTIS, O-T-I-S, optical telescope and instrument something. And this is at the Johnson Space Center. This is Chamber A, the Apollo chamber that was retrofitted for web testing. So we didn't have a chamber large enough to do thermal vacuum testing and to test all the optics. So we actually did that at the Johnson Space Center. Coincidentally, it was we started testing right as Hurricane Harvey was coming along. So we rode out the storm. Actually, a lot of our people got out into the community to help out, but we got the testing done that summer and leading into fall. Next slide. So this is a short video, if we can click that. And this is testing the deployment of the secondary mirror. And it's going to pop out and come right towards you, a lot slower than what you would see here. And you can see the size of this thing when you look at the people there. Just one note that you go back. Oh, here we go. Still playing. I'm sorry. One note that you can't see, there are some cables from the ceiling holding up those trusses.
Okay, Greg, or you want me to go backward?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
Because we're trying to do it as much as possible with no gravity. So we're trying to offload gravity because this will deploy in space, and we try to test as close to as possible as the we call it test as you fly. Next slide, which is also a short video, and you'll see some of the development work and the integration and tests. Next one.
I'm just going to let it run and then I'm going to
Okay,
go.
it's pretty short.
It's incredible.
It is, very much so. Let's just click through to the next one. I forget how many times that one plays. Let's click to the next slide.
Okay.
Couple more clicks. It's not advancing for some reason.
Okay, good.
Okay, here we go. So this is when we actually made it the Otis. You can let it play, and I'll just talk as it goes.
Okay.
The telescope and instrument package to the spacecraft bus. I'll just let it run. So this was a huge undertaking to bring these two together. This is out in Southern California. You can see in the background, Northrop Grumman facility. And this took a while to get here. And you can see the sun shields land on either side, on the fore and aft side of the telescope. And in a few minutes, we'll see that deploy. So I'm gonna just let it play. You can give it a little volume if you want.
Amazing the size of the sunshine. Wow. Can we stop here? Do you want to talk or continue, or?
We'll go to the next slide, but I'll just say a couple words. So you saw the sun shield deploy. Again, the size of a tennis court, and with 5 membrane layers. All of that is new technology. The membranes, the material itself, and of course, getting all of that into a sun shield. And the purpose of that sun shield.
Quickly, Greg, how thin is a sun shield?
I'm sorry?
How thin is a sun shield?
I missed that.
Thick. I'm asking how thin, thick.
Oh,
is a
each
sun
membrane is extremely thin, like a hair on your head. That's how thin it is.
Wow.
And there are 5 of them. And when you're doing, we use a lot of what we call MLI, multi-layer insulation in space. And if you think of MLI, you have multiple layers of insulation, but you have it separated with some kind of material. In this case, we have a very thin layer and separated with space. So there are 5 of these, and they're separated with a certain amount of space between each one. So it continues to reduce the level of heat from layer to layer. So on one side of the telescope that's peering off into space, we need to keep it extremely cold, almost to absolute zero, and cold and dark. So we're trying to protect it from the heat and the light of the sun and the moon and Earth. On the other side, we want to keep it nice and toasty, because that's where the spacecraft electronics and instrument electronics and instrument themselves on the other side. So we're trying to keep those fairly warm. And we need that sun shield in order to do that. It's a critical piece. So this is the what we call the stowed configuration. After we got everything mated, did deployments, we had to run it through the observatory level environmental testing. So we test acoustics. So the sound, if you ever go to a concert, you stand by the speaker, you get all of this sound popping in your ear. So when we launch a rocket, there's a lot of sound inside that fairing, and we need the observatory to survive that sound. So we do an acoustics test, make sure that it will survive, and then we do a vibration test. We put it on a shaker table, and it shakes it in 3 different axes. And that also shows that it can survive what we call the shake, rattle, and roll of the launch vehicle going into space. So it did well there. And then we do functional testing afterwards, just to make sure it works after that ride to space. Next slide. And this is the sun shield full attention. You can't see all of the layers, but if you look real hard, you can see there are 5 of them. And it doesn't look like it here, but it's truly a tennis court size. And I often joke about, imagine Venus on one side and Serena on the other, assuming that the sun shield will stand all of that power that they possess, but a really big sun shield. And you can see the telescope here, the primary mirror. You see 12 of the 18 segments, and we have 3 on each side that are folded back. And that's how it's folded when we launch it. Next slide. And this is the mirror fully deployed. Next slide. And this is you can see the sun shield on both sides, but it's folded up. And you can see the mirror in the middle. It's also folded. Keep going. And this is a fully stowed observatory. This was not too long before we got ready to ship it. So you can see the sun shield folded up like a field goal post with the mirror inside. Of course, the spacecraft bus is at the bottom. Next slide. And this is the Mission Ops Center and ground system. This is at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Maryland. And this is where we will actually operate Webb from. So shortly after launch and separation from the rocket, the Mission Ops Center actually takes over and starts commanding the observatory. And they will operate it from then until. That team is well rehearsed. They have all the procedures nice and crisp. So they're ready to go as soon as we get it off the ground. Next slide. So I mentioned the partnership. So we're launching, one of the contributions of ESA in addition to instruments is the Ariane 5 rocket developed by Ariane Space. Of course, Europe's spaceport is in South America, it's in French Guiana, Kourou, French Guiana. That ship there, the Colibri, we sailed on late September down to French Guiana and to early to mid-October. Next slide. And this is leaving north of Grumman late one night and heading down to Seal Beach. And you can see it next to the ship, and we loaded it that same day and left the next day. Next slide. This is arrival in French Guiana in Kourou. That was on October 10th or 11th, somewhere in there. Next slide. And this was the ship actually coming into port. going up the Karoo River. Next slide. I think I may have mixed up the order of these. It's coming off the boat here. Keep going. And so we're in the high bay, the clean room at the spaceport in French Guiana. We just took it out of the shipping container. You can see it's still horizontal. That's the way we ship it. Of course, it launches vertically. Next slide. And this is the vertical position. This was about 2.5 weeks ago. Next slide. And on December 18th, we're gonna launch this into space. It's been about 20 years in development, roughly $10 billion observatory. And we're going out to Lagrange point 2. That's a very stable orbit, 1 million miles away from the Earth. And it'll operate in that orbit throughout its lifetime. Next slide. And just, we can just let this play and run for very quick. You can see Hubble, and as we start to get into infrared with Hubble optics, how we can peer through the dust and smoke and and fog of space and see much clearer images. So a lot more power there in the Webb telescope. And you can keep going. So that's the presentation. Again, this is it's a huge time coming. It's been a long time. We've had over 10,000 people around the world work on Webb, scientists, engineers, technicians, resource people, finance people, attorneys. You pick it, pretty much everything you would think you would need to develop a large telescope like this. So I'll open it up for questions about Webb and questions about me.
I have some questions, but I would let first the audience, if you guys have a question, jump right in or raise your hand, or you can just have, raise your hand in no actions, or just unmute and ask your question. So Greg, I can start until people think about their questions. I wanted to hear about your trajectory. We had, your personal trajectory, how you got to be where you are, and some challenges that you had, and some opportunities that you had. And in particular, we are looking for not the typical, middle-aged white guy that comes into. So what, did you see any difference? I imagine that when you were coming up, there was not a lot of Blacks, right? In space physics or in NASA. So I know for myself, when I started space physics, being a foreigner, and was very, very different. And as women also was very different. And later on I came out, was very different. So I checked a lot of differences that I had to navigate. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be interesting, I think.
Yeah. So I'll start off saying, well, you can look at me and tell them not the average person in this field. I am a double E, not a scientist, but what you said still applies.
It's true, it's still the same thing,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I have a few years under my belt. So as I often say, don't let the good looks fool you. I grew up in Southern Virginia, Danville, Virginia, just outside of Danville, actually, in the 60s. And, that was a real turbulent time in the country and in some cases around the world. And it was what we call the Deep South. So opportunities were low. I started off in segregated schools. Schools were desegregated when I went to 5th grade. And life was interesting, similar to what you see on TV. Of course, when you live in it, it's very different from TV. So as time went on, I was, looking back, I was one of the smart kids. Someone coined the phrase, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. So unfortunately, a lot of bright minds that looked like me that did not get opportunity, or for one reason or another, did not move on. So I was blessed enough to seemed to get into the right classes. Of course, during that time, the counselors were pushing folks who looked like me to vocational classes. It's just the way it was. And normally I fought against that, and I went to the other classes. And that's how it was throughout until I went through high school. So I took all the advanced classes. I did well, and I did as good as anyone else in the classes. So I went on to college. Actually, probably would not have gone to college. Again, part of the challenge. I went on a football scholarship, and so that's what kind of set me on my way. And never really played. I was on the team for a little while, but never really played. But that's what got me, as we often say, out of Danville, Virginia. And of course, I went to Virginia Union in Richmond. I did a dual degree with Howard University for double E. And actually came out of school working for AT&T, Mont Bell. It was one big phone company back then, for the senior folks on the line. And now there are many across the globe. And I forget exactly how I ended up at NASA, but I've been with NASA over 32 years. I started off at Goddard Space Flight Center. And I rarely applied for a new job. Normally someone would say, "We think you ought to go do this or go lead that." And then I had a lot of mentors, which I didn't even refer to them that way back then, but people I looked up to, and I would go pick their brains, and they would say, "Well, you probably should do this, or go talk to this person, or take that class." And most times I followed their lead and did that. And one day, someone asked me about doing a development program at NASA headquarters. And I was kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. And my boss said, "Well, we need to send you to charm school, so I think you need to go." I thought I was already charming. So I did the 1-year detail at headquarters, and they asked me to apply for a position there, which I did. And the rest is kind of history. A whole lot of twists and turns in there, but the rest is history.
So Greg, before I see one hand raised, and I'm sure other people are going to start asking more questions, I wanted to ask a little bit more about the mentorship. This is something that we struggle in SHIELD as we are reaching for different communities. We have an advisee in our border impact, Julie Borges, that went to Howard as well. And we were picking her brain, how bring more people from HBCUs and to bring it to space physics. And it's always a challenge. How did you pick your mentors? You speak about mentors. I know myself, when I arrived to US, I had no idea. I felt like I was arriving to a party that was already going on, and finding out the mentors is a challenge. So I would like to hear from you. And also, as you were growing up, you said you went to the classes, the right classes, but did you have somebody in your family, like a grandma, an aunt, anybody that said, Gregory, you should do that?
So again, shaping time frame and location, right? So there were not a lot of people around in my family or otherwise who had the kind of careers that we're talking about here.
Right.
And so sometimes when you can't see it, it's hard to be it, right?
Right.
So certainly got a lot of really good advice about life from home, from family and others, but not about careers per se. So you get all the things about work hard, continue to strive, pursue, better educate yourself. Those types of things with other stories mixed into that. But as I started my career, I would see people in action. And I said, geez, I really like the way that person makes decisions, or I like the way that person asks questions. So in some cases, you try to emulate a little bit from each person. In other cases, you'd send an email to catch someone after a meeting, say, "Hey, you got a minute? I'd like to chat." And you build a relationship. And that way it makes it easy to go back. And you mentioned classes. One of my mentors, and again, I never call these people mentors. These were people I reached out to that helped me along the way. Right. And there were a lot. one of my bosses actually was 2 levels up from me. When my immediate boss asked me to go to a class, it was the Goddard, one of the higher Goddard classes at the time. I felt like I was beyond that point. I said, well, geez, I could probably teach the class now. And he didn't like my answer, so he went to his boss, and his boss called me over and said, had a little talk with me and told me how important the class was and classes like that. So that kind of set me on my way. And these were classes, non-technical. I thought if you worked hard, if you were strong technically, you'd be okay. He helped me understand that these soft skills were critical. These leadership skills, networking skills, leading teams, developing teams, those kinds of skills were critical, and they've proven to be for me. So I'm a huge advocate of the soft skill training and intact team training and so on.
I have more questions, but I'm going to open the floor and let other people. I saw John Cooper was one of the first to raise his hand. So John, you want to unmute or put your video on? What's best? Yes.
You hear me?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, Mr. Robinson, I wanted to congratulate you on your career. And you are now very high up in the buck stops here chain. So with that in mind, I'd just like to ask a question about Webb. Is with all the experience that we had with Hubble and I guess the 4 different repair missions, some of which were involved my friend John Grunsfeld, why has a decision been made not to enable any on-orbit type repairs if something doesn't quite work right? And is there an option to come back to low Earth orbit, if that has to be done?
So, John is a good colleague of mine as well, and certainly he did a lot of that servicing, and he would like to do more if he could. So that decision was made a long time ago, 20-ish years ago, to not have Webb to be serviceable for multiple reasons. So on Hubble, we were still flying the space shuttle. Hubble is in low Earth orbit, so right in where shuttle flew to. And so it was designed to be what I call modular. The instruments were external on this spacecraft versus Webb. Those instruments are buried internally. It was built to be refueled, all the grappling in the right places and so on for servicing. So 20-ish years ago, NASA made a decision that since Webb would be in a million miles away, Hubble shuttle was phasing out at the time. We knew it would end. At the time, we were thinking 2010. And at that time, Webb was supposed to launch in 2014, if you could imagine. So there was no capability for human servicing, and the distance was so far away. Robotic servicing was in its very infancy, and it's still not mature where we'd like it. Therefore, and of course, the costs and the techniques are different when you go serviceable. So those decisions were made largely for those reasons. Now, with that said, we do have the ability to refuel if we ever get that robotic technology, and we have grappling capability if we have to go there. So hopefully I answered your question.
Okay, well, I guess the question is whether it could be brought back to low Earth orbit.
No.
That's not possible?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know that Nick had a question, and then we can circulate if there are more people, and then I have another one. Nick.
So Heather has a question in chat.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
I skipped Heather. You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Heather, you want to unmute and ask?
Yeah. I wanted to know, like, what in particular led you to apply your engineering skills to space research? Like, because I come from the South, and it's just not, I come from South Carolina. It's not a typical field from somebody from where I'm from. And I was just wondering if there was, like, how did you kind of move into that whole space area?
So there's something about engineers. We tend to think we can do anything, and the skills are truly transferable across any industry, any product. So an opportunity came along, and that's how I ended up at Goddard. So someone asked me to to come over and see if I wanted to play in that area, and I was very intrigued and never looked back.
So you just happened to meet someone that was working on it, and that's
I knew multiple people. They weren't working on Webb; they were working in the space business.
yeah.
And the way they talked about it certainly interests me. And so there were some conversations connecting people, and that's how I ended up there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I do want to thank you for bringing up soft skills. And that was one thing that I was pushing Marav to do, and it was part of the
Other impact.
yeah.
team.
So part of the inspiration for doing this web series was that there are a lot of skills that aren't typically taught in classes, but they make a huge difference to your career. And that if no matter for what reason you're at a disadvantage, doesn't matter the source of that disadvantage, what's really helpful is if you can find a way to overcome and develop the skills that you really need. And so that's why we've been looking into mentoring and figuring out what we could do to really help people, and it can be helping anyone. And so that was kind of our inspiration. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yeah, fantastic. I think next is Joyce. She is our Director of Broader Impacts for Phase 1. She's not going to, unfortunately, go with us to Phase 2, but we have another amazing that is passing the baton from Joyce. So Joyce, yes, go ahead.
Yes, so thank you for that. I think that was wonderful, and I think it was great how you shared kind of your path and how you emulate others, and really how you're demystifying the process. I want to ask you a question about how you said at the end of your talk, you were saying how you wanted to thank everybody, and you said that anybody can be involved. I think you said there's 10,000 people involved in putting this together. And I was wondering if you can comment on the diversity of kinds of expertise, like engineers or scientists, or like even maybe non-scientists, and I'm wondering how you think NASA is doing a job in terms of like letting people know that you can have really diverse people with diverse backgrounds that can really contribute to such a big undertaking as this. So myself, I'm a material scientist, so I was really happy to hear you say that there's really high performance materials needed for this, but I'm just wondering if you can expand a little bit more on the diversity of kinds of expertise and ideas bringing this to fruition.
Let's see, so you have a lot packed into that question. At least I heard a lot.
Joyce,
so first, by far more engineers than anyone else. It's just part of what we do. A large number of scientists and a large number of technicians, and many technicians, depending on where you are and what you're doing, almost at engineer level without the degree, believe it or not. Apologize for the clock. So we use everyone. The old saying, it's a true story. When someone was at JWST doing the Apollo, asked the janitor about what do they do? They said they're trying to help put a person on the moon, right? So everyone contributes to the mission, and indirectly and directly. And of course, directly, I mentioned finance people and contracts people, lawyers, and the list goes on. Those were not indirect. These were people who were directly involved. Because you have to do contracts, and contracts involve, law. You have to do your budgets and all of your earned value stuff. So you need finance type people, and the list goes on. But by far more engineers. Now, diversity in general. When I look at not just skill diversity, the space business has a long way to go. In NASA, with our contractor base, and certainly with a lot of what we call the new space companies, we have a long ways to go. And so I say that's an opportunity. I think activities like SHIELD, many activities that we're doing within NASA and around the country and some places around the world will help us get there. But it's slow going. I might say disappointingly compared to my days way back in the 60s.
Yeah. So just, Marav, can I ask you a follow-up, Marav, really quickly?
Absolutely.
Because I think one of the goals that SHIELD is trying to do is like saying, and it's something Heather has brought up a lot too, is what is a space physicist or what is a space scientist and so I guess it's saying that even if you're not necessarily in space physics, you can contribute in some way. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that with the broader impact, you could educate and let people even be aware of the problem and how they can contribute. I guess that's what I'm saying. And that's one of the goals that SHIELD is trying to do. But thank you. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Thanks.
I had a follow-up question to Joyce, and then I would pass to Nick. Nick asked, he wanted to ask something. You know, we hear a lot about diversity. I wanted to come back to this issue. We have this social scientist in our advising committee for SHIELD trying to, you know, ask the right questions. And her name is Janet Vartese. And one of her statements that from social science, you need a core group to make a difference, to make you feel good. So if you have 30% of, let's pick female scientists, if you have 30% of them, they start feeling maybe there is enough of a critical mass that the change is possible. But here, as we are counting, and the change is slower in space physics. So I wanted to hear your thoughts regarding your challenges that you went through your career, being less than 30% probably in the room of one like you, of your background, or first generation also scientists, you know, it brings a new challenge in itself.
So I think if we want to see change, regardless of the change we're talking about, we have to be involved in that. And when we do have opportunity to be in the room, we have to make sure that the conversation facilitates all of that. So just a couple of quick stories. You know, younger in my career, I'd go to meetings, and there'd be one female in the room. My daughters get upset when I say female. One woman in the room, and I'd be the only person of color in the room. And you know, sometimes you're sitting around before the meeting starts, and people are making these jokes, these sexual jokes that I'm sure are not funny to the woman sitting there. And so when you're doing that, and the meeting starts, even if she's the smartest person in the room and has the best solutions, she's probably not going to speak up, right? You've already told her that this is not your welcoming environment. So why would she speak up? And so when you have people in the room who kind of laugh at the joke, even though they don't think it's funny, or they're quiet, they're continuing that environment. So I think when someone speaks up about the joke, you have to figure out how to do it your own way, because you don't necessarily, your intent is not to piss people off, it's really to help them understand what the environment should be. Once that happens, there's a much higher probability that woman will speak up now. She feels comfortable. I'm not the only one here. And there are other folks who want to open this thing up. And you will also see people nod positively that, yes, we agree. So we have to be part of the change that we want to see. And we have different ways of doing it. And all of us have different personalities, right? So we have to do it our own way, as I say. But some of these things are simple, but they're so complex. The simple part is you just think of people just like yourself, right? And certainly all of us want to see someone who looks like us, whether they think like us or not, it's another story. But the first order, we want to see someone who looks like us. And then as time goes on, as people get into more leadership roles, influential positions, that's when you really see the change. So we certainly have to really feed the pipeline to start the process. But again, as people move up, normally that's where you see the change occurs. So in organizations where a lot of the leadership is diverse, then you can look at the employment base and you will see a similar type diversity.
Yeah, that was a fantastic answer. It was great. Nick, I know you mentioned to me you had a question.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for a very nice talk. I really appreciate the overview and really looking forward to the pictures that we're gonna get. It's hard to imagine something that's gonna like blow away Hubble, right? But so it's going to be very interesting to see what's coming back. So the interesting thing that struck me about some of your story was you're being told somebody's coming to you and saying you need to do more training, right? And you're like a fully fledged professional. You've got a degree, and now somebody's coming to you selling on you need to take this class. How did you receive that, and what was said? It sounds like you pushed back on that a little bit. What was said that brought it that you hinted that somebody else said that something that convinced you to take the class, but I'd like to know what that was that we can pass along or at least modify somehow to convince younger people that they need to do this thing, right?
So one is, and I apologize for my 14-year-old, 11.5-pound terrier here, a terrier too. So there were two things in my case. I mentioned one of my senior leaders. He strongly encouraged me that I should go take the class. Shouldn't take that, but again, my paradigm was: you're technical, you work hard. Certainly, if you're working what we call flight projects, then you're going to be okay. So that helped. And then another good friend, colleague of mine, who's retired now from NASA, and actually, I think his degree is in psychology or one of the social sciences. He has a PhD from Columbia. He teaches there now too. So he was always encouraging me. We would have these debates. So I actually went to one of these classes, and I was just sold. Once I went, experienced it, and I saw other technical people there, project managers, engineers, others. So the bug bit me, and I was not a fan of it going in, but I can certainly tell you coming out, I was a huge fan.
That's fantastic, Greg. I'm being chatting back and forth with Myra. Myra knows you, but she has a question that I think will be interesting to us in general, because we're here trying to brainstorm, even for phase 2, what we can implement. So Myra, go ahead. Myra was another amazing speaker we had earlier.
I was wondering about that Myra person down there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really wanted, because I can talk to you anytime, but I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about mentors. And I know you said that you don't really recognize people as mentors when you're learning from them, but what do you think of like formal mentoring activities versus informal, more organic ones?
I think you need both for a lot of reasons. One is the formal ones. Some people are just not open. They're not comfortable just seeking people out. And in some cases, they're not sure who to seek out either. So I think the formal programs allow for that. And there are a lot of people who go that route, and I strongly encourage it and endorse it. And then you have others that are more open, have a lot more, I won't say initiative, but just their personality. They're a lot more open and to approaching people and asking questions. And in that process, and generally, certainly, Myra, NASA, people want to help. People want to tell you about something. So once you open that up, it's easy to go back. And it's easy to make a phone call. It's easy to send an email. So, but not everyone is comfortable making that initial engagement. So you need both.
That's great. Heather, you have the last question because we have to wrap it up.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times it's hard to feel like if you're the only one in the room and you're different in some major way. It's hard, like you're saying, like, yeah, you want to see somebody that looks like you, but then what I found is when I have a lot of one-on-one conversations with people, that I can find a different way to find a way for somebody to relate with me. And it could be that we like similar music, like similar sports. Sometimes these one-on-one casual conversations can lead to helping you form kind of a way to see, for somebody to relate to you that looks very different than you. And I wonder if you had some similar experiences.
Oh, absolutely. And it's certainly not either or. It's yes, yes, yes. All of these approaches are helpful. So in my experience, and I have a lot of stories, when I first got to headquarters in this detail role, this development role I was talking about, there were two gentlemen there. They worked in one worked in science, one worked in aeronautics. And they were senior guys at the time, and they were so rough. Really smart. You had to go to them for certain things, but they were rough with people. And Myra's smiling, she probably knows both of them, who I'm talking about. And so we were on travel together. I think it was an engineering management board, probably in Houston. And we went out to dinner, big, long table, a lot of people out to dinner. But one of those guys sat across from me. And so it was a lot of time to talk, 3 or 4 people, but most of the 2 of us talking about family and things like that. And from that day on, we got back to the office. He was a different person in my eyes. This guy that was tough to approach. It was like going to talk to somebody I'd known for 30 years. Just going to dinner that one night, and some other factors with the other guy that led to the same thing. So I definitely agree with you, having some time to just talk one-on-one, finding common interests. Certainly around family is a big deal with that. So absolutely agree with you.
That's fantastic. Greg, I can't thank you enough for coming and giving this talk. We update it, we upload it in our website, so we will have way more viewers. We also have the trailers that we make out of them that tell the story. And Myra, I will send you the one we made for your webinars. It's really, really, really nice. But it's very inspirational. I asked to bring some Latin music to yours, Myra. So it's really inspirational. And I think yes, I know. We had one scientist that she grew up in Iran, and we started the webinar with an Iranian song, and she said she cried. So bringing this, experience, this personal experiences to these webinars, I'm so delighted. And congratulations again for being these managers of this James Webb. It's an amazing, amazing project. So looking forward, guys, to see you in phase 2, hopefully. And thank you so much again. Bye.
Thank you for having me. I had a ball. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I adored it. Okay.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.